While such a slow pace and serious tone might be appropriate for scenes in Yerushalayim, they are entirely unfitting for the Moscow scenes. As a point of comparison, we look to Yuri Kara's unreleased version of Master and Margarita, filmed in 1994. It actually just got released in St. Petersburg yesterday. Kara, even using some of Bortko's actors, but in different roles, captures the playful and satirical tone of the novel much more readily. The scene between Karotya Fagot and Nikanor Ivanovich illustrates this. With their emphasis on physicality and slapstick, Kara's actors do not shy away from the absurd. In contrast, Bortko's actors, with their focus on decorum, blend into the perfectly stylized mise-en-scène. So first we're going to watch a clip, the same exact scene from the Bortko version.
Кадеев едет в Ялту.
Я здесь. Он уже уехал, он же черт знает где. Николай Иванович, ввиду того, что господин Воланд ни почем не желает жить в гостинице, а жить он привык просторно, то не сдаст ли же товарищу на недельку ему всю квартиру, то есть и комнату покойного. Ведь ему безразлично, покойному. Ему, ну сами согласитесь, Николай Иванович, квартира это ни к чему.
Иностранцам полагается жить в метрополе.
Галушка, капризный черт знает что. Не желает. Не желает, не люблю.
And now Yuri Kara's version with Alexander Filipenko in the role of Karotya Fagot, who plays Azazela in Bortko's.
Когда Сельхадеев едет в Ялту, да он уж уехал. Он, знаете ли, скачет, уж он черт знает где. Мне необходимо лично повидать иностранца. Никак не можно, он занят, дрессирует кота. Кота, если угодно, могу показать. Не надо кота, покорно благодарю. Николай Иванович, видите, Николай Иванович, ввиду того, что господин Воланд ни почем не желает жить в гостинице, не сдаст ли жил товарищество на неделю. Ему квартиру. То есть всю квартиру, включая комнаты покойного. Покойного, как вы сами понимаете, теперь иностранцам полагается жить в метрополе. Капризен, говорю вам, да ты черт. Значит, не желает он, не любит он в гостинице. Вот они меня делают.
Bulgakov's Woland turns Moscow on its head, and the most pleasurable and subversive aspect of the Moscow narrative is his gang shenanigans. Bortko, with airs of respectful restraint, devitalizes the humor, at once diverting attention to the biblical narrative and reinforcing the gravity of Woland's authority. The novel Master and Margarita further achieves ambiguity by marginalizing the main villains. The novel's faceless NKVD, often vaguely referred to as the authorities, or euphemized to the point of deification, take on human forms in Bortko's production. In the miniseries, the NKVD plays such a large role that Bortko even added a character, the Lavrenti Beria-like NKVD chief played by Valentin Gaft, notably Woland in Yuri Kara's version. Gaft's character is only credited as the man in the military jacket, Человек во Френче, but the damage is done. Where Bulgakov's intangible hand of oppression is ubiquitous and immortal, Bortko, by putting a face on the source of terror, localizes it and confines it to the past. The temporality of Bortko's miniseries favors epic past to the living present. Sequences set in Rome provide a story of the imperial bureaucrat who lost but eventually regained his moral authority by being understood and thus partially forgiven by his divine interlocutor. The diegetic present of the serial, the year of the Great Terror, 1937, lacks the authority of the great Roman imperial past. It is the time of petty demons and profane desires. However, even this diegetic present is not a present of novelistic proximity. By using the documentary footage of this, and shooting Moscow sequences in sepia, the most noticeable stylistic choices of the series, Bortko creates a simulacrum of Bulgakov's Moscow, what Clark and Holquist call, quote, a textual museum of antiquated speech, end quote. The sepia tonality further helps to distance Bulgakov's Russia from Bortko's Russia by counteracting the unavoidable visual continuity between the two eras manifested in the monumental landmarks of Moscow and an enduring Soviet style of interior decor. And so we've got some slides here. In the first image, we see the interior of a Soviet kitchen. Now, for those of us who have spent time in Russia, we can attest to the fact that this kitchen, were it not for the sepia tonality, could be a modern-day Russian kitchen. By shooting Moscow scenes in sepia, Bortko creates a perfectly stylized past, preempting undesirable parallels between the Soviet past and the post-Soviet present. The mythology of an eternal and great empire, on the other hand, offers a very desirable continuity and finds a proper visual expression in the repeated shots of the Kremlin scattered throughout the Moscow setting. For example, we see Berlioz's funeral procession parading past Margarita, but also, thanks to Valery Mulgaut's careful framing, past the Kremlin. In the final scenes of the series, the documentary footage of the monumental Moscow landscape transitions seamlessly into the digitally mastered embodiment of imperial legacy. This time, the skyline of Moscow with the Kremlin is in color, which visually links the image to the imperial tradition of Rome and to the CGI-enhanced epic present of Russia's capital. Russia's cinema knows the tradition of engaging with Bulgakov's texts via grotesque leveling of high and low, and celebrating the proximity to the profane here and now. In 1973, Leonid Gaidai shot a screen version of Bulgakov's play Ivan Vassilievich. Bulgakov set his play in two temporal planes on the collision course, in contemporary Moscow and in the time of Ivan the Terrible. The play brings the characters from both eras into carnivalistic contact. So when Gaidai decided to make his version of the play, he made sure that he preserved the contemporaneity of the action set in Moscow in order to maintain the novelistic temporality of the proximity to the mundane and profane present. His film was set in the 1970s and in the Middle Ages. This narrative logic of carnivalistic proximity is also important for Bulgakov's Modernist novel, but not for Bortko's serial. In his production, both narrative lines exist as museums of antiquated discourses that have the authoritative value of belonging to Russia's rich, albeit flawed, national heritage. Their function is to shed the light of cultural authority on the present. Television adaptations of national classic literary works demonstrate an attempt to infiltrate the Western-dominated medium of television with that which is unmistakably Russian. If in Soviet-era television literary adaptations were a way for the party to bring high culture to a low-culture medium in accordance with the Soviet values of edification of the masses, then post-Soviet literary adaptations are a way for state-sponsored channels to shore up the myth of national heritage. Even the Soviet Union, at least in the late socialist era, allowed a variety of foreign adaptations amidst the otherwise anti-Western programming. The absence of adaptations of foreign literature in the post-Soviet canon is quite conspicuous. In post-Soviet Russia, literary adaptations represent a compromise between commercialism and state building, acquiescing to the inevitable decline in readership while paying tribute to a tradition of logocentrism. While the growth and popularity of the form, in tandem with the state expropriation of the media, represents a break from the more commercial free-for-all media culture of the 1990s, there is an understanding that certain commercial values must be maintained in order to attract audiences. Thus, we still see an emphasis on big names in casting and flashy special effects. The result, as we see with Bortko's Master and Margarita, is a tame rendition of a mischievous novel now accessible to millions and adorned with a myth of cultural authority and national exceptionalism. As befits a masterpiece, during its first run on Russian television, Master and Margarita was screened in a primetime slot without commercial interruptions, harkening back to an advertisement-free Soviet past. The intended message was that the high culture series is more important than standard programming, that it should be given undivided attention, and that Western commercial codes do not apply to it. Thus, literature, and by extension, television that is based on literature, takes a privileged place among the arts. Incidentally, as David McFadden informs us, after the first week, funding fell short and the second half of the series aired with commercials. As one disappointed web respondent points out, An interruption that directly followed the famous line, "Manuscripts don't burn," was particularly unfortunate. Волан сказал мастеру, знаменитая рукопись не горят. В этот момент вставили рекламу, так что испортили весь эффект. By staking claim on a novel that Soviet censors would not abide, the new Russian state can prominently display its disapproval of limitations on artistic expression. But by proleptically controlling the message of the text, the series does so at very little risk of instigating the type of criticism of authority that Bulgakov puts forth in his novel. Ironically, as the incident with commercials suggests, even a perfectly controlled text exists in a commercialized and global television medium. By becoming part of the television flow, which is always contemporary, Bulgakov's text regains some of its